The chase-withdraw cycle is one of the most painful patterns you can get trapped in with an avoidant partner, and it can quietly convince you that love is something you must fight for every time they disappear emotionally. You reach for closeness, they step back. You ask for clarity, they go vague. You try to repair, they shut down. The more you pursue connection, the more their nervous system reads it as pressure. The more they withdraw, the more your nervous system reads it as rejection. So you intensify your effort, hoping that if you explain better, love harder, stay calmer, or become more easy to handle, they'll finally stay present, and they might return in small bursts. Just enough to keep hope alive, just enough to make you question your standards, just enough to keep the cycle running. This is what makes the pattern so sneaky. It doesn't start as chaos. It often starts as chemistry. The avoidant is warm in the beginning, attentive when it feels safe, charming when closeness hasn't demanded real vulnerability yet. Then intimacy deepens, needs become real, accountability becomes necessary. And suddenly the emotional temperature shifts. They pull away to regulate. You chase to regulate. Both of you are trying to feel safe, but the dynamic becomes unbalanced because one person is using distance as control while the other is using pursuit as survival. It's not that your needs are too big. It's that the relationship has been trained to treat your needs as the trigger for their retreat, and their retreat as the trigger for your anxiety. And here's the brutal truth about this loop. It rewards the avoidance pattern and exhausts your heart. Every time you chase, you accidentally teach the relationship that their withdrawal will still be held, repaired, and softened by your effort. Your love becomes the cushion that absorbs the impact of their inconsistency. Your empathy becomes the bridge that prevents them from fully facing consequence. Your patience keeps the connection alive even when they are not emotionally present enough to do their half of the work. So even though your chasing comes from love, it can function like a system that protects avoidance from having to evolve. That's why leaving emotionally, stepping back, reducing pursuit, or even physically walking away is sometimes the only thing strong enough to break the chase-withdraw cycle. Not to punish them, not to manipulate them into panic, but to end the silent agreement that says, I will keep this relationship breathing even if you keep going emotionally missing. When you stop chasing, you remove the fuel. You stop proving your worth through endurance. You stop turning their distance into your job to fix. You stop paying for connection with your nervous system. Your absence or emotional withdrawal changes the entire power dynamic because it changes the rules of reality. For the first time, the avoidant has to feel the true outcome of choosing distance, not the dramatic outcome you try to force with arguments or tears, but the quiet, sobering outcome of your energy no longer rushing in to save the bond. This is where they may finally reflect. This is where they may finally realize that closeness isn't the enemy avoidance is. And even if they don't reach that insight right away, the pattern can no longer operate the same way if one person refuses to play their part. For you, this shift is equally important, maybe even more important, because the chase-withdraw cycle doesn't just hurt your relationship, it reshapes your self-worth. It trains you to believe that love must be earned through overfunctioning. It teaches you to doubt your needs. It seduces you into lowering your standards because the relief of their return feels like proof of progress. But relief is not stability. And your heart cannot keep living on a schedule where intimacy is rationed and reassurance arrives only after emotional exhaustion. So when you step back, you are not just breaking a pattern with them. You are breaking a pattern inside yourself. You are reclaiming the truth that love is not supposed to be a constant audition. You are reminding your nervous system what dignity feels like. You are choosing a healthier rule. Connection must be mutual and consistency must be normal, not a reward you receive after suffering long enough. And if the avoidant truly values you and is capable of growth, this is where you'll see it. Not in a dramatic single-day comeback, but in steady, respectful effort that continues even when you are calm again. And if they can't meet you there, your decision to stop chasing still becomes your freedom, because you no longer confuse anxiety with love or endurance with destiny. When you stay in a relationship where an avoidant partner can pull away, go cold, or delay repair, and still feel secure that you'll keep anchoring the bond, comfort quietly replaces reality. It doesn't happen because you're foolish. It happens because you're loving. You want to believe that enough patience, enough clarity, enough softness will eventually create safety between you. So you keep showing up, even when you're tired. You keep explaining, even when you've already explained. You keep giving the benefit of the doubt, even when the pattern has started to look like a lifestyle. And over time, Your love becomes a cushion. A beautiful one, but still a cushion. It absorbs the impact of distance, so the avoidant doesn't have to feel the full weight of what their pattern costs. This is why the second truth matters so much. Leaving forces reality to replace comfort. It removes the emotional insurance policy that says, I can retreat and they'll still be here. It interrupts the quiet entitlement that can grow when a partner learns they can access your warmth on their schedule without offering you consistency on yours. When you're always available to soften the tension after they disengage, their nervous system learns a dangerous lesson. Avoidant works. It keeps them safe from vulnerability while still keeping the bond alive. That isn't always conscious manipulation. Often it's a protective reflex shaped by years of emotional survival. But the outcome is still the same. You become the one doing emotional maintenance for two. Reality is a teacher comfort can compete with. Comfort says, this will probably be okay. They always come back. Reality says, if I keep choosing distance, I might actually lose someone who loved me deeply. When you stay in a cycle too long, the avoidant can start to interpret your endurance as proof that the relationship can survive anything. Even your pain, even your loneliness, even your repeated unmet needs. Your loyalty can accidentally become the reason they delay change because the threat of loss is muted by the certainty of your presence. So when you step back or leave, it does just create space. It creates truth. It also exposes the difference between space and escape. Healthy space contains communication, reassurance, and a plan to reconnect. Escape contains silence and emotional avoidance disguised as self-care. If you are always there to interpret their silence kindly, they never have to examine whether their version of needing space is respectful or harmful. But when you pull your energy back, the story changes. They can no longer rely on your empathy to do the emotional translation. They have to face what their strategy actually does to love. And you do too. Because reality doesn't only wake them up, it wakes you up. It shows you whether you were in a temporary season of difficulty or a long-term pattern of emotional imbalance. It shows you whether your hopes were aligned with evidence. It shows you whether you've been trying to build a secure relationship in an environment where insecurity is repeatedly chosen. Your leaving becomes a line in the sand that your nervous system has been begging you to draw. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself with the same intensity you offered them. This is the part that can feel scary for an empath. You might worry that stepping back makes you cold or selfish, but forcing reality is not cruelty. It is integrity. It is the refusal to keep paying for connection with your self-worth. It is the decision to stop normalizing emotional disappearing as a relationship style. It is you saying, I won't keep making your comfort more important than my stability. When reality replaces comfort, one of two things usually happens. The avoidant rises, or the pattern reveals itself completely. If they rise, they begin to engage differently. They communicate earlier. They take accountability without you dragging it out of them. They become more consistent not just in crisis but in everyday life. They realize that your presence is a privilege that must be protected with effort. If they don't rise, then your leaving becomes your protection, not your loss. Because you stop living in emotional suspense. You stop waiting for clarity that only arrives when you're at your breaking point. So if you're tempted to see leaving as a manipulation tool, don't. That's not the point. The point is that reality is the only environment where meaningful change can take root. You can't love someone into growth if your love is constantly shielding them from consequence. You can't keep someone emotionally responsible if your role is always to smooth over their avoidance. And you can't keep sacrificing your peace while calling it patience. This keynote is not telling you to abandon love. It's telling you to stop replacing love with endurance. Because when you step back, you restore balance. You give the relationship a chance to breathe in truth. You let action speak without your constant rescue. And you remind yourself of something essential. You are not meant to be the emotional life support system for someone who won't learn how to hold love with both hands. When you leave an avoidant partner, or even when you emotionally step back in a real, grounded way, you expose something that words and arguments can't reveal, whether the love was deep and growth capable, or whether it was mostly convenience wrapped in affection. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, because when you love someone, you want to believe that the good moments are the real blueprint and the painful moments are just temporary weather. But patterns are not weather. Patterns are identity unless someone chooses to change them. Convenient love thrives on your emotional labor. It relies on your patience, your forgiveness, your ability to soothe your own hurt while staying loyal to the bond. It benefits from your softness without respecting the structure that your softness needs to stay healthy. A convenient dynamic looks like this. They come close when it suits them, they retreat when it costs them, and the relationship survives because you keep carrying the emotional weight in the background. Your loyalty becomes the invisible engine. Your understanding becomes the cushion. Your hope becomes the bridge that constantly repairs what they won't face directly. So when you finally step away, you are not creating drama. You're removing the safety net that made it easy for someone to stay half in, half out. You are clearing the fog so the truth can stand alone in daylight. That's why leaving can be such a powerful test, not a cruel test, a natural one. Because it answers a question your nervous system has been asking quietly for months or years. Will this person show up for me when I'm no longer doing all the work to keep us stable? Real love doesn't require you to weaken yourself to keep it alive. Real love can handle your standards. Real love doesn't treat your needs as pressure. It treats them as clarity. So when you step back, a person with real capacity for love may feel the loss, but they don't just panic. They reflect. They self-correct. They move toward repair with humility and consistency. They don't return to you only with emotion, they return with intention. They show you that your safety matters as much as their comfort. Convenience, on the other hand, often reacts in one of two shallow ways. It either disappears completely, or it returns with urgency that fades the moment access is restored. You'll notice this pattern if their tenderness only lives in crisis. If they get affectionate when you detach, but go distant once you relax. If they deliver big words when they fear losing you, but resist real accountability when you ask for structure. Convenience is not always malicious. Sometimes it's just emotional immaturity, but the outcome is the same. You become the one who pays for the relationship's survival with your peace. This is why your leaving is more than an exit. It's a truth revealer. It shows you what your presence was actually doing. Was your presence inspiring mutual growth? Or was your presence enabling emotional comfort without responsibility? Because for many avoidant dynamics, your consistent availability becomes a kind of implicit permission. They can delay change because you keep proving you'll stay. They can rationalize distance because you keep re-entering the cycle. They can avoid the deeper work because the relationship is still being held together by your emotional stamina. When you stop doing that, the reality is simple and sharp. If they want you, they will have to meet you in something healthier than the old pattern. Not perfect overnight, but genuinely different. Consistency that survives calm. Communication that arrives before damage. Accountability that doesn't require you to beg for it. Effort that isn't tied to fear. And here's what matters most. This test is not only for them, it's also for you. Because when you step back, you also discover how much of your identity was tied to being the one who tries harder. You see how often you confused endurance with devotion. You notice the emotional addiction to relief after pain. You start to recognize that missing someone is not the same as being safe with someone. And that awareness is a massive upgrade. It's the moment your heart stops being managed by hope alone and starts being guided by evidence. So if you're in that phase where you're considering leaving, or you've already stepped into silence after being pushed too far, understand the sacred purpose of that space. It doesn't exist to punish. It exists to reveal. It reveals whether they can love you with maturity. It reveals whether your standards are respected or resisted. It reveals whether your presence was cherished or simply convenient. And no matter what it reveals, you win something priceless, self-trust, because the healthiest love story is not the one where someone finally chases you after losing you. The healthiest love story is the one where you no longer need to shrink, suffer, or scramble to be valued. Your leaving isn't just an ending. Sometimes it's the only moment where the truth finally becomes clear enough for real love to prove itself, or for you to walk forward without confusion. When we say that leaving can protect your nervous system, we're talking about something deeper than self-respect as a slogan. We're talking about your body, your sleep, your anxiety, your ability to feel safe inside love. Because in an avoidant dynamic, the emotional injury isn't only what happens in arguments. The injury is the unpredictability, the warm then cold, the closeness then disappearing, the connection that feels real on Monday and ghost-like on Thursday. That instability trains your nervous system to live on alert, and over time, you start confusing stress with love. You might not even realize how much you're carrying until you step away. You wake up checking your phone with a tight chest. You replay your last message trying to see what you said wrong. You soften your needs before you even speak because you've learned that asking for more presence might trigger their retreat. You become an emotional weather reporter tracking their moods, pacing your honesty, adjusting your expectations to avoid the next shutdown. That isn't romance. That's hypervigilance. This is the invisible cost of loving someone who regulates closeness by controlling distance. You begin to live in a relationship that requires you to self-regulate constantly while also trying to emotionally co-regulate them. You become the stable one, the understanding one, the translator, the peacemaker. And yes, you might be good at it, but being good at surviving a dynamic doesn't mean the dynamic is healthy for you. Your nervous system doesn't lie. It learns patterns faster than your mind wants to accept. When someone repeatedly withdraws after intimacy, your body starts anticipating the withdrawal even during the good moments. You might be laughing with them, but part of you is bracing. You might be feeling close, but part of you is waiting for the drop. This is how people become anxious in relationships that are not consistently safe. It's not because you're insecure. It's because your body is responding to evidence. So leaving, or emotionally stepping back, becomes protection in the most compassionate way. It stops the constant cycle of activation and disappointment. It removes you from a pattern that trains your nervous system to equate love with uncertainty. It gives your body a chance to come off the emotional adrenaline. It allows your baseline to reset. It lets you remember what calm feels like. This is also why so many people feel guilty for leaving. They think it's selfish. They think it's harsh. But your nervous system has a right to safety. Love is not supposed to require you to abandon your own emotional stability to prove devotion. If you keep staying in a dynamic that repeatedly triggers your anxiety, you're not being loyal to love. You're being loyal to a pattern that is shrinking you. And listen closely, this is not about demonizing avoidance. Many avoidant partners are not bad people. Many are good humans with protective wiring shaped by old emotional experiences. The point is not to label them as villains. The point is to stop making their wound your home. Understanding why someone behaves a certain way doesn't mean your body should keep paying the price for it. This is where the empath's biggest upgrade happens. You stop measuring love by how much you can endure. You stop thinking that being the safe one means you must be endlessly flexible. You stop rescuing the connection when the other person steps out of responsibility. Your nervous system begins to learn a new truth. You are allowed to require consistency, not just hope for it. Leaving can also protect your nervous system from emotional addiction. Yes, addiction. Because the relief you feel when an avoidant returns after distance can become chemically reinforcing. The low hurts, the return soothes, the contrast feels like intimacy. And you get pulled into a cycle where your body starts craving the high of their comeback. This is how people get trapped, not because they're weak, but because the nervous system is trying to survive unpredictability by clinging to the moments of relief. Stepping away breaks that loop. It stops teaching your body that love is a roller coaster you must ride to feel chosen. When your nervous system is protected, your standards become clearer, your intuition gets louder, your self-trust returns. You stop over-explaining. You stop negotiating for basic emotional presence. You stop feeling like you must perform stability to earn someone's consistency. And you begin to recognize the difference between someone who is overwhelmed and still willing to repair, and someone who uses overwhelm as a long-term excuse to stay emotionally unavailable. This is why the healthiest version of leaving isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's you refusing to chase. Sometimes it's you slowing access. Sometimes it's you stepping back until there's real evidence of change. The form may vary, but the purpose is the same. Your nervous system stops being collateral damage because the truth is, your peace is not optional. It is the foundation of any love worth keeping. If leaving is what allows your body to breathe again, your heart to soften again, your mind to stop scanning for the next emotional shutdown, then leaving is not failure. It's protection. It's your nervous system finally being loved by you in the way it deserved all along. When you leave an avoidant partner, or even when you stop emotionally holding the entire relationship together, you create a kind of silence that finally gives truth enough space to surface. This is not the dramatic silence of punishment. It's the quiet absence of emotional overfunctioning. For a long time, the avoidant may have been relating to you through a protective system where your love absorbed the impact of their distance. You were the one who bridged the gaps, softened the ruptures, reopened the door, and kept the emotional temperature stable even when they went cold. That doesn't mean you were weak. It means you had endurance and emotional maturity. But when that endurance becomes predictable, It can quietly delay their self-reflection. Why would someone look honestly at their pattern if the relationship remains emotionally insured by your patience? Avoidant attachment doesn't always mean a lack of feeling. Often it means feeling too much too fast, then shutting down to survive. Many avoidants are carrying old conditioning that taught them closeness equals risk, needs equal pressure, emotions equal danger, so they develop distance as a coping strategy. That strategy can work in the short term to soothe the nervous system, but it becomes harmful when it turns into a relational identity. If every time they withdraw you chase, reassure, explain, or rescue the bonds, their nervous system learns a silent lesson: deactivation is effective and low cost. You soothe the emotional discomfort for both of you. You reduce consequence without meaning to. You keep the connection alive on effort that isn't mutual. So when you finally leave, something changes that conversations often couldn't change. They lose the familiar cushioning. The pattern can no longer hide behind your empathy. The relationship stops being maintained for them. And that moment, for some avoidants, becomes the first time they can actually feel the full meaning of their own choices without your emotional labor constantly offsetting the impact. It forces an internal reckoning, not always instantly and not always beautifully, but it creates the conditions for it. This is why space can be the doorway to self-reflection, because an avoidance defenses often collapse more in quiet consequence than in heated confrontation. Arguments can trigger their shutdown. Tears can feel like pressure. Repeated emotional explanations can make them feel trapped. But absence is different. Absence is clean. It doesn't demand anything. It simply reveals what life feels like without you. It creates a mirror made of reality rather than words. And that mirror can be hard to ignore. They may start hearing the echoes of moments they dismissed. The times you asked for consistency. The times you tried to repair and they disappeared. The times you were patient while quietly eroding inside. Your absence changes the storyline from "this is uncomfortable, but manageable" to "this might be a real loss." That shift can awaken grief. It can awaken regret. It can awaken curiosity about their own patterns. They may begin to ask questions they never asked while you were still making everything emotionally survivable. Why do I pull away when someone loves me well? Why do I only soften when I'm afraid of losing them? Why does intimacy feel like danger, even when this person is safe? For some avoidants, that reflection leads to actual growth. They might seek therapy. They might read about attachment. They might begin practicing uncomfortable skills like staying present in conflict, naming feeling states, or communicating before distance becomes damage. The key is that these shifts become possible when the relationship stops offering an easy escape route. The real world finally becomes the teacher. Your leaving creates a learning environment where avoidance no longer guarantees comfort. But you also need to hold the truth that self-reflection is not guaranteed. Some avoidants will interpret your leaving as proof that closeness is unsafe and double down on distance. Others may come back with panic and intensity but with no consistent plan for change. That's why this keynote is about possibility, not promise. The space you create can invite reflection, but you are not responsible for whether they accept that invitation. And here's the part that protects your heart. You must not stay trapped in a cycle just to be the catalyst for someone else's awakening. You are not a rehabilitation center for unprocessed attachment wounds. If your leaving sparks their self-reflection, that's meaningful. But your primary reason for stepping back should still be you, your peace, your emotional safety. Your right to love without constantly proving you can tolerate inconsistency. Because when you're always there, always trying, always explaining, it's easy for them to remain emotionally asleep inside the dynamic. When you leave, you stop doing the relationship's thinking and feeling for two. You return responsibility to its rightful owner. You give love the one thing it needs to become real on both sides, mutual accountability. And whether they rise into that growth or not, the space you create remains powerful because it ends the silent story that your needs can be postponed forever without consequence. Emotional authority is what happens when you stop living at the mercy of someone else's distance and start living by the rules of your own self-respect. It's not dominance. It's not control. It's not coldness. It's the quiet power of someone who finally understands that love without emotional safety is not love you should keep paying for. In avoidant dynamics, you can slowly lose this authority without realizing it. You start asking permission to have needs. You start editing your truth so they don't shut down. You start minimizing your expectations so the relationship can survive. You become so focused on staying connected that you forget you were supposed to be protected in the connection too. That's how the imbalance forms. The avoidant sets the emotional thermostat with distance. You become the one adjusting yourself to match it. You learn which topics make them disappear. You learn which tone keeps them calm. You learn how to make your pain sound reasonable so it won't trigger their retreat. You think you're being mature, but what's really happening is that your nervous system is being trained to accept emotional uncertainty as normal. Little by little, the relationship stops being a place where your truth is welcome and starts becoming a place where your truth has to be strategically managed. Leaving or stepping back in a real way is often the moment emotional authority returns to you. Because for the first time, you stop negotiating your dignity. You stop trying to compete with someone's fear. You stop offering unlimited access to a heart that is repeatedly asked to self-abandon. You aren't saying, I must be chosen to feel valuable. You're saying, I only stay where love is safe for me. That shift is massive. It changes your internal identity from the person who begs for consistency to the person who requires mutual effort. Emotional authority also means you stop confusing intensity with security. Avoidant partners can sometimes surge toward you when they sense you slipping away, and that surge can feel like proof that you matter. But authority allows you to think clearly in the middle of that emotional noise. You no longer get hypnotized by a dramatic return. You look for the steady pattern. You ask, can you show up when things are calm, not just when you're afraid? Can you repair without me carrying the script? Can you respect my boundaries without punishing me with silence? You move from being emotionally reactive to being emotionally discerning. This is why emotional authority is not only relational, it's personal. It's your relationship with yourself finally becoming more loyal than your longing. You stop abandoning your needs just to preserve connection. You stop feeling guilty for wanting clarity. You stop interpreting your standards as too much. You start recognizing that someone's inability to meet healthy needs does not make those needs unreasonable. It simply reveals their current capacity. And your authority is the refusal to shrink your life to match someone else's limited emotional bandwidth. When you step into this authority, your language changes. Even if you don't say much, you don't argue in circles. You don't explain the same boundary 10 times. You don't keep offering empathy as a substitute for accountability. You make your truth simple and clean. I want consistency. I want respectful communication. I'm open to repair. I'm not open to mixed signals. And then you let actions speak. That is what scares an avoidant pattern and frees a healthy partner, because a pattern thrives when it can be endlessly negotiated. A healthy bond thrives when the standards are clear and the effort is mutual. The most beautiful part is what this does to your nervous system. Emotional authority brings your body back to safety. You stop waking up braced for the next emotional disappearance. You stop checking your phone like it carries your worth. You stop living in high-alert devotion. Your heart can finally breathe because it's no longer trying to earn stability from someone who keeps delaying it. You start feeling the difference between love that is exciting and love that is secure. You start choosing the kind of affection that doesn't require you to be anxious to be valued. And here's the quiet truth beneath it all. This authority is why some avoidants only realize you when you leave, not because you were playing a game, but because your absence is the first time your standards become undeniable. Your emotional labor is no longer cushioning their pattern. Your presence is no longer guaranteed. The dynamic is no longer powered by your overfunctioning. That doesn't guarantee they will grow, but it does guarantee something equally important. You will no longer be a passenger in your own love story. Emotional authority is you becoming the decision maker again. You stop asking, how do I make them choose me? And start living inside a stronger reality. I choose what is worthy of my peace. That is the kind of shift that doesn't just change one relationship, it changes the rest of your life.